Alrighty, waiting for the recording prompt here, so thank you for that introduction. Yeah, so as Wade mentioned, in this time of stay inside, we can still do some cool stuff out in the natural environment to help the process, and part of that's going to be learning about invasive species, and part of that's going to be potentially, even while doing social distancing with your friends and family, going out there and finding invasive species and putting them up in a database that the DNR will use to help give reports to their biologists, and something that we use in our scoping of projects. So it's citizen science at its finest. Get outside, take some free time to go and do some work in the environment. Now, in the course of this class, in this webinar, I'm not going to be able to train you to be ID experts, but I will be sharing some resources that you can then go through and click through at your leisure. And the plan is to send out a PDF version of this webinar to all the participants that registered via Eventbrite. So if you did not do that via Eventbrite, go ahead and email me, or you can still register. I think registration is closed. So email me at matt@upwardsugar.org, and we can get you that information as well. And this is also being recorded. So what you should know and how to report them to protect our lands and waters. So what is an invasive species? What makes it that? So this is the actual legal definition you're going to see here on your screen. This is what is in our state law, and that's kind of a bunch of gobbledygook, right? I mean, what does that mean? Let's break that down a little bit. In particular, we're talking about species that aren't from here originally, that weren't that are kind of come here since the settlers have moved in, and that are going to be doing some variety of harm to either our natural environment or also our economic health. So here's some examples of things you might notice invasive species impacting. And as a watershed association, we care about the health of our water, we care about the recreational access, we care about fishing, and those are all things that can be negatively impacted by the presence of invasive species. So, and one of, I think, the classic examples of one that's on the rise in our local area is, I'm going to show a picture of it here. So you see this as human health concerns, toxic and allergenic plants. So this next one is a slide of wild parsnip, which is it's a spreading invasive species, and it's a good one to note from an ID class like this. It's got like a Queen Anne's lace top to it. It's yellow, and why this is such a concern is this plant, wild parsnip, can cause photosynthetic burns. So pardon me if it's a little gross, but sometimes these things can be actually serious to the point of causing human health concerns. So definitely stuff to watch out for, wild parsnip. Now, when it comes to, again, what defines these things, the rule that classifies them, if you're curious, is called Chapter NR40, which is, you can look up and type in Wisconsin NR40, and there is a little link there on the bottom to this site. And it's talking about how we classify organisms. So what does DNR use to define a native species versus an invasive species? And this is a question that I get all the time, as far as what people consider an invasive species versus what I would call an aggressive native. So as I mentioned earlier, if a species was around in the time of settlement or before, that's kind of how we classify it as native or naturalized to the region. And one of the resources that there's this book, The Vegetation of Wisconsin by John Curtis, is one of the classic works of Wisconsin that helps define what was considered to be here at the time of settlement, using different records from initial surveyors that were out there looking at the botany of Wisconsin. And so that doesn't quite cover everything. You might recognize his name. He's the Prairie at the Arboretum is named after him here in Madison. That doesn't quite always cover everything, so we also do rely upon our expert biologists at the DNR, and they can make a call as far as distribution historically and what we're considering to be native versus invasive. And the real thing about invasive species is that that other slide said non-indigenous. That means that they're not from here originally. And when a species moves away from where it was originally located, where it kind of has a balanced ecosystem around it, it escapes a lot of disease and pest pressure that would otherwise keep it in check. So if you think about things that might grow really fast around here, like maybe wild cucumber, for example, that's that vine that has been climbing over the sides of roads and along pine trees and in kind of open areas, it's having a really great couple of years. Now, does that make it invasive? By our terminology, no. We're going to call that a aggressive native versus the things that are coming from Europe, South America, all over the rest of the world that have similar growing conditions as us that can thrive here. They don't have the same pressures that are going to help keep them in check. So they have a tendency to be the bully in the room, kind of a thug. They make big stands of what we call a monoculture. You know, they can crowd out our natives to the exclusion of almost anything else, except sometimes other invasive species. And that's often how they cause the damage that they do. It's just they're taking over space that our balanced Wisconsin ecology would otherwise fill with a variety of different kinds of life that they instead are taking over just for themselves. And they often don't set very deep roots, so they can cause erosion and just the birds and the bugs and all the things that we love about Wisconsin don't have a chance to thrive like they're used to once they get out-competed. So I'm going to go briefly into the different categories. And now the reason we're going to cover this is because I'm going to mention prohibited versus restricted species, and that's part of that NR40 rule. It's kind of a way that at the DNR and that for my work, we help to look at the severity of how serious an infestation is. So if something is prohibited, it means that it is just getting started here in the state. So that means it's actually illegal to possess, transport, transfer, or introduce that species. And that's kind of like the red flag highest category for invasive that we can use at this time in the state. And so when we find those populations, of which New Zealand mud snails count as one of those, we'll get into that later, we want to really make sure we report those and get that report into the DNR so that they can know where these things are spreading and mobilize activities to control them. That's compared to restricted species that are restricted species. And these are things like garlic mustard, glossy buckthorn, common buckthorn, the species that probably pop to your mind right away when you think of invasive species. They're very widely spread in the environment, so we don't focus quite as much energy on controlling them because their eradication is unlikely. We're never going to really rid the state of them entirely, but we would like to still know where they are so that we can see how they're spreading and see how they're impacting our other local native species. And to make this just a step more interesting, so there are some species that are in fact county split listed and prohibited and restricted. So in some parts of the state where things have not quite yet reached a large population size, we want to give them that prohibited status so that we can direct our resources to control them. But then in other parts of the state, they're already really widespread, and the focus is not going to be on controlling them there. And so this is a picture of Phragmites, which is Upper Sugar has active projects working with this species, in fact, in Greene County. And if you notice Greene County, it is a prohibited area down here at the bottom for Phragmites. So that allows us to receive more funding and prioritize that work in that area. And the little cross hatch area in the middle that's what they call the restricted frontier, that's where just to kind of highlight the edge of where we're likely seeing spread coming in from. So I think a great example for us in our watershed that it's only really occurs in a few places in the state, and our watershed is one of them, is the New Zealand mud snail. So something that you all may be familiar with if you've been following along with the Upper Sugar River Watershed Association for a few years. They are a very very small little snail, as you see here, and if you look at the size of them on this dime in particular, notice just how small they are. And so these are ones that we really want to make sure that we prevent their spread. And so I'm just going to use this as a kind of a case study for how we look at invasive species in the region, and also how we can prevent their further spread with some different steps that come through. So now part of what my job is to go ahead and get what are called verified populations. And so this is an example. This is the surface water data viewer. And if you type in surface water data viewer space DNR, you can find a link to this. So these are all the verified populations of New Zealand mud snails in the entire state. And if you notice, they're really quite clustered around our area, with some of them right in our watershed and some of them just to the north. And this little pop out here is pointing at. So you know, this is the list of spots, and some of this is definitely citizen-based work that people have found these in their trout fishing expeditions, in their explorations into different rivers and streams, and they've made sure to let their local invasive species experts know. And this is one where if you find these guys, if you think that's what it is, take a picture, send it in to me, submit that to matt@uppersugar.org. You can also do that by the Eddmaps link, but sometimes it's best to go old school and just go right to the source. And so there's you can actually send that if it's especially in our region, send more reports right to me, especially if they're outside of these creeks and streams that are listed here by the DNR. So these guys are a particular menace because they often invasive species are really good pioneers. And what they're really doing is this picture here shows just how dense they get on the side of on a rock, or on they grow in mud, they grow on rocks, and there's been reports of them getting up to 400,000 individuals in 1 square meter of water, which is a lot. And these little critters, they come pre-fertilized, so they can actually have a whole nother population that can pop up just from one. They're basically clones. So there's 2 clone types, of which we have one of the more aggressive clone types here in Wisconsin. So just one of these guys stuck in the bottom of your boot is enough to start a whole population. And these things are, they're not getting eaten by the trout and ducks that you would think would eat our native snails, and they're out competing with our native animals that would be using the same nutrients in the mud and filter feeding the little bits of I think it's like as they move around with their snail body, they're picking up and eating little bits of detritus and things like that and plankton that are going to be their food source. So they're upsetting the ecology of our natural species, as I mentioned before. What can you do? So now we know a little bit about, there's a lot of different invasive species out there. NR40 lists 200 plus species. So there's a lot to know, and you can kind of know your region and your threats by looking at, looking at some of the resources, some of the fact sheets, and seeing where they're distributed. The big one I want to emphasize, what you can do to prevent the spread of these, if you've been using those felt-soled boots forever, the DNR and Upper Sugar recommends that you go ahead and put those to the curb if at all possible. Now you can, in fact, decontaminate them, but they seem to be one of the biggest ways that New Zealand mud snails spread. And there's other types of things that can spread along there, the bottoms, because these felt-tool bottoms don't dry out completely, and New Zealand mud snails can live up to 26 days out of water with a little bit of dampness. So, so let's go through some basic steps for how to prevent the spread of New Zealand mud snails in particular, but this also applies for other stuff that you might find that gets attached to your boots and your boats. So before you leave a water body, inspect, drain, scrub, and rinse if at all possible. And it is in fact required by law to do this. So part of our programming that we do with Upper Sugar is the Clean Boats, Clean Waters program, which is a reminder from people to get out there and clean your boats and your gear after fishing. But that goes all the way, that's kind of a lakes program, and we're a lot of river loving folk. We have a lot of, in our watershed, a lot of great rivers and streams, and that's true of the whole driftless area. So these rules still apply. And so a little extra thing to take out with you when you're camping and boating, go ahead and get that stiff brush and bring a little bit of a bottle of water so that when your day is done, you got your boots and your gear, just give them a rinse, scrub off any dirt and mud that you see. Those little snails can be so small, they're hard to see with the naked eye, especially the juveniles. The juveniles can be, they're microscopic, so you can look right past them. So go ahead and scrub your gear, give it a rinse. And then that's as you're leaving a water body. So that's kind of as you're in the water and leaving a site. Now, once you are at home, before you go to another water body, here are the recommendations that we have that you're going to go ahead and take care of New Zealand mud snails in particular. You can freeze them. You have a chest freezer or room in your freezer. You can put your boots or waders in there for 8 hours. You can wash them with steam. You can soak them, which basically, it's probably the simplest answer for most people is just to soak them in their 120 is going to be like your hot water cycle for your washing machine. You can just go ahead and put them in there for a few minutes. Or if you're really going hardcore, we bought some Virkon solution, which is for professionals. It's kind of a caustic thing, but it does definitely successfully kill them. Bleach water and other cleaning supplies are not going to do the job. So these are the DNR recommended steps. And so, one of our jobs too is that we put up these signs. This is at the Pirelli takeout. So again, remember, these are your steps: inspect, remove, drain, and never move species for your boats, and that's for your gear. So again, there is a ton of stuff out there that you can kind of learn about as you're building your knowledge of invasive species prevention. And so I'm going to share some tools that I got from a partner that we work with, which is the Wisconsin First Detectors Network. So here is the Wisconsin First Detectors Network, and we work with their staff to provide high quality trainings, and there's some great tools. So we're going to emphasize here is the fact sheets. So if you go to this site up here, extension it's WIFDN, Wisconsin First Detector Network, they have a ton of fact sheets and ID videos available. And again, with the time that we have today, I can't go through all of them. There's a lot of them, but I would encourage you to do so when you have some spare time in this whole quarantine situation. So I'll pop up a page that looks something like this, and by clicking on a sheet, garlic mustard, for example, you can get fact sheets and videos about how to ID them, the main traits and characteristics that are going to help you distinguish them from our native lookalikes and other invasive species. And then they also have things that are they in fact have control and management recommendations too. So this is a great spot if you're saying, oh, I wonder how to take care of Japanese barberry or other invasive plants. This site here is going to have some great stuff for you to click on and learn about in this time. So other things that might pop up, you're saying, well, but what am I worried about right now? So if we're asking you to be engaged in the current season of social distancing and invasive species monitoring, you might want to know what can you see. And so we're going to go ahead and look at the tools over here. And there's a really great tool here that's called, this is the when to look at stuff. And so you click on there and you're going to find one of the things that pops up is the Wisconsin Invasive Species Calendar. Now, as we kind of look through this, you can go ahead and look at what time of the year you're looking for. And so here we are in April, and they're going to have a life stage as far as, is it dormant, is it green, is it flowering, is it fruiting and seeding, or are the leaves changing color? And then also by how filled in the bubble is on that, it'll tell you how detectable it is. So as we can see right now, in April, coming out of March and into April, we would think that garlic mustard here is going to be quite detectable. But so if you're looking for garlic mustard in December, it tells you you're out of luck. And this is a great way to prioritize. You can go, all these drop downs up here will tell you can go by month or by detectability. And if you want to see the things that are the most detectable at any given time, you can do that by clicking on some options and getting through all of that information. So it's a nice focus for getting out there and doing this work. Again, that's at that same website as before, and this is just highlighting the as I was mentioning the box for how all that works. And there is our calendar. All right, and then so now that we've got an idea about the narrative of why they're bad, what they do to the environment. We've got an idea of how the actual like how we can find them in particular at this time of the year, like what species to be on the lookout for, and then from there you can kind of look at the fact sheets, right? Now we're going to go and do how to report them. And there's two different techniques for how we do this. As far as you can either go online, you can make reports in the field, take some pictures and come back and put it on your computer, or you can also use the GLEDN app, which I'll get to at the end, and that's how we go ahead and report them right from the field, which is really quite handy as we're all becoming more mobile enabled. So the first step would be go to eddmaps.org, which is up here on the top, and make yourself go ahead and get yourself a profile so that you can have this stuff reported in the future. And then once you got your profile set, you're going to go ahead and start reporting sightings. So that's the little button there. And by clicking on that, you will then go ahead and pop up the online reporting form. And it's all so this is stuff to know when you're looking at invasive species. What's the date? How much space is there? What kind of habitat? What's the abundance? And they actually have other stuff too. And if you have to estimate this stuff or you're not sure, that's fine too. But this is nice stuff to know before you go into it. And once you're there, you're going to go ahead and fill all the stuff out and put in that location. And these all just kind of, it just walks you right through this. It's quite explanatory. You go ahead and drop this pin, move this pin around so you can say exactly where it is, and then it's going to make that Latin long easy to find there. Ownership information. And then, so as we're going on here, this is basically the tool that's going to allow you to then, if it's a point like we have currently, there's just one point there, but there's also other options. So that the hand, you can move it around. You can draw a line, or you can also draw a polygon if you want to say, oh, it's not right there, but it's this whole region. You can actually go ahead and do that so that we have a more accurate idea of where stuff is. And here's the last thing is take some pictures, take some notes, and then you hit submit report, and it's going to then submit that in there, and they're going to go back to your dashboard. So this is Anne's account. So she's got, this is all the kind of stuff. You can go back and look at your, your previous reports over here and see where they're all at. And so that way, if you want to go back it's to say you made an error, you wanted to revisit, view, delete, you can do that way. So that's a nice way, especially if you're out in the field and you don't want to have your smartphone, or you're in a place that doesn't have great signal, and you want to come back and do it on your home, you can do that. However, there's a more elegant way to do this, which is the GLEDN app. And so that's GLEDN, which is linked to Eddmaps, and that stands for the Great Lakes Early Detection Network. It's a partnership through these organizations. It's for Apple and Android. And again, you're going to need to have an associated that little Eddmaps account is going to be important. You'll sign in with that, and then once you think you found a species out there on your device, what you'll do is you'll say, okay, you know, go ahead and click on all species. So say I've got something that I think, well, let's see, what do we got? We got some. You can search for it. Garlic mustard. There's a whole list of stuff, and it goes across both plants and animals. So it's more than just plants. In fact, New Zealand mud snails is on here. And then as you're going through, you're going to go ahead and this is on an Apple version. Make sure you allow your location use, and then fill out that form once again. So it's a little more streamlined here in that once you have your location selected, you can add a photo by clicking on that button. And then you kind of use sliders more. So click on that button there and add something in. And then you've got different sliders for how you're going to go ahead and, you know, you can take a picture. Often I find it's higher quality to just go ahead and take a picture first and then load up the application, just so that often your hardware is going to work better with whatever software that you have, like your camera app is going to be better than whatever they have online. So, you know, take that picture and keep on reporting. So, you know, it's nice to get, you know, a couple different shots of, and get close in if possible. If you have a good zoom on there, you can see in this picture, you can really see the teeth on this plant, and that really helps to get verified. Now, as I'm doing this, you're probably asking, well, who looks at these? And just, you know, if I was just, you know, I'm not very educated about this, I could say this was whatever, right? The nice thing about Eddmaps is that they use a network of verifiers who will then, once these are submitted, actually look at the photos, at the location, and also at your history as far as who you are. You know, if they know you're a noted biologist, it's going to give them more credit. If they don't know you from anybody, they might be more skeptical. But they will actually then verify these pictures and reports before they're posted online. So it helps keep up some of the noise, some of the background noise you would otherwise get. So clicking through this app a little more, that's, again, it's pretty much automatic based upon wherever you are, and your accuracy will pop up automatically. And then that's the dot. But as you can see, there's also options for, if you want to do a polygon here at the bottom, you could stretch out and you can make an area that would be a little wider. So point, and then that's the polygon view there to the right. So now you've got your your data all there, and you actually can do this offline. So say you were taking pictures, you had a GPS signal, but you were still away from easy internet access. This upload queue here is what you're going to go ahead and do in order to submit your final report. So this is an important step, that once you've got your data in there, you can go ahead and you know, up here, take your actions, and upload is the final step. And once those are uploaded, you should get some communication as once they're finally verified as far as their accuracy and verification from the team there. And that data gets used, as I mentioned, by biologists and the DNR all the time to help plan control projects and to allocate funding for this kind of work. So that is my whirlwind tour of invasive species resources that you can use in this time. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for paying attention. Thank you to Ann Pierce from the Wisconsin First Detector Network for those resources. Thanks to Wisconsin Brewing Company for hosting us usually, though obviously I am not there right now. I am in my basement office. And I appreciate everybody attending. And at this point, I'd like to open it up to our chat and see what questions came in. So
yeah, we have a few coming in.
Great.
Kristen is asking, how do you find it to download the GLEDN app? Do you have any recommendations on how to download that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so you should be able to go to your app store, And let's find that page again. So it's called the Great Lakes Early Detection Network. Okay, so if you go to your App Store or your Google Play Store and you type in Great Lakes Early Detection Network, that's going to pop up your search, and that you should be able to find it there pretty easily.
Great.
So give that a try and let me know if that works. And I'm here for the duration. So if you got your phone in front of you right now, give it a go and see how it works. Okay, what else we got?
Yeah, and then Bill has a question about listing the sites for the apps. If I think this is the same, maybe a similar question, but if you have, I think in a future email after this presentation, we'll send an email to all the participants and give some links that were helpful.
Yep, sure. And then these links are in fact clickable. So when you get this this PDF, and we can pull them out as well. So these are all right here at the extension, and then if you go up to, so for example, the New Zealand mud snails, this fact sheet's down here, and I guess Surface Water Data Viewer would be a good one to link to as well as the Eddmaps site itself is right here, is eddmaps.org. So great question. Let's make sure to get you those resources tomorrow, so that what's fresh in your mind, you can go ahead and click through stuff with all this knowledge in place. Great question. What else we got?
Robert has a question about, are there pre-settlement species that have become problematic as human population and dispersion has increased and expanded?
Sure. Interesting question. Yeah, so again, that's kind of like, they can be. And in fact, restoration, it's really, it's hard. It's easy as people to talk about good and bad, and kind of, that's all a matter of perspective for what we're trying to achieve, right? So if you're trying to achieve a native hillside prairie or goat prairie, which you'll often see inside, like on a steep hillside. Now, like red cedar growing into that goat prairie, which are actually named after the fact that I think, you need to be a goat to access them. They don't actually grow goats, but they're very steep. So red cedar is considered to be an issue for the restoration of those sites. However, red cedar has been here since pre-settlement times, and is not classified as invasive species. So, and the same can be true with our native sumac that comes along the sides of open spaces and wild cucumbers. So now the reason that and even sugar maple and deer are a threat to oak forest regeneration, right? And those have obviously been here for a very long time. So for making restoration decisions, you definitely do come into cases where you say, yeah, you know what, even though this is native, we're going to want to control this because we'd rather encourage other species. However, I guess what distinguishes often those, what I would call an aggressive native versus an invasive species, is that even our aggressive natives, there's a host of bugs and birds, other insects and other plants that associate in a food web, and as part of the ecology of Wisconsin. So they're more likely to be in balance with the rest of the things around them, while the invasive species from other parts of the world, and the ones that have been explicitly listed in NR40, are the ones that really have a lot of potential to do a lot of damage by making those big monocultures, and nothing has evolved to control them. So there's often no insects that eat them. There's no, the deer don't like them for whatever reason. They don't browse on them. So they've just escaped that pressure. So yeah, very, very interesting. It's definitely it's a call you have to make about what your overall restoration goals are. And it does definitely distinguish how the funding is directed for that kind of stuff. All right, what else we got?
Great. I don't see any other questions. I have a question though.
Sure.
What is, for the Eddmaps and for the GLEDN app, how does DNR treat this data as findings come in?
Sure. So I actually worked with someone in natural heritage conservation named Jason Granberg, and he's the invasive plant specialist. So he is pulling data from a variety of sources, and it's actually a pretty recent establishment that they're willing to look at this data at all. It's in the last year that they've actually come to the point where they're going to say, yeah, you know what, we are happy with verified reports on Eddmaps. And as an example, for a project that we're doing with Upper Sugar right now, I'm working on finding landowners in certain watersheds that have, some that have invasive species reports. So when these Eddmaps reports go in, I can then ask him for the GIS layer or for a report, and that it will include these Eddmap reports of what's out there. And so then I can use that information to do my work of finding landowners to work with. Other examples of this are when they're doing like watershed prioritization projects or other restoration projects. They can then pull up Eddmaps and say, what are we looking at right now in the region? How do we, what's infestation that's been reported? What are their big threats? Kind of how pristine is this? It helps them make prioritization judgments. So often we want to, kind of the overall mentality for invasive species control and prevention is to protect the most pristine sites first. So if we see an area that has a low amount of invasive species, it helps to kick it up in priority for how we'd like to maybe make it into a state natural area or spend money to control that stuff. Where if we see 1,000 reports of 10 different species, we know that it's already been invaded and likely doesn't have the same high quality ecosystem there. So I've seen examples of DNR property managers using Eddmaps data to help predict them. And then another important thing is that they also use it to track the spread. So can you say, well, how big of an issue is this at the end of the day, really? Is this stuff running rampant across the landscape, or is it just at this one site? We think it's bad. We don't see it anywhere else. So by having this time scale of observations coming in from citizens that have been verified, it allows the DNR to look at trends long term as far as how they're looking at what's happening with that particular species and how to prioritize it.
Great. And Adam has another question too. He's just saying that he's not a botanist, but how can the non-botanist community approach wanting to help out, but if they don't want to make a bunch of false calls in the app? So what is the best way to go about that? Is it targeting certain species, or is it a different route?
Yeah, I think that start small. I would say, and it's a great foray into the world of botany, and I guess it's a process. And I know that the scale of this, it's a lot of tools, and the ID component was not really there because it's like there's so many species I'd like to cover, and it's can kind of deflect right off you. My best advice is to get a book, get a guide of some variety, and the DNR does sell a nice little $5 field guide to invasive species pamphlet, and they also do have fact sheets that you can order online from them, or go out with. Really, the best way is if you have a friend, go out with a friend who knows some of the stuff, can help you point out the ID characteristics. We'll also be offering these as trainings through ourselves and through other partners. We'll be doing live ID classes. So that's something we're looking at the Wisconsin First. In fact, I'm glad you asked, because just this Friday, I'll be going over a top 10. It'll be like a full 2 hours, hour and a half to 2 hours of presentations in which we're going through some ID tips and going through there. And I guess my other tip is don't be shy. You have to start somewhere. I know it's a lot. So just find some that you think you're pretty sure about and start verifying them. And there's actually feedback that you'll get from this process. So if you think something is emerald cork tree invasive, take those pictures, put in Eddmaps. You actually get feedback from the verification process they're going to say, no, that's not, like, this is what we think this is, so that's not. So you actually, the way that Eddmaps is set up allows you to get feedback on your own photos that you take and kind of improve yourself from there. It's definitely, it's a lot to learn. I won't say otherwise. It's definitely, it's something that, it's going to take a little bit of time, but don't be shy, get going. And, if you put bad data in there, it's not going to make it to the DNR, because that's the whole point of the verification process.
Robert mentioned as well, and Robert and Bill both mentioned that there's somewhat accurate apps out there for identifying plants.
Yes, that's true.
iNaturalist is one of them.
Yep.
I know Bill had one that he had been using on his phone that was remarkably accurate. So there are some apps out there to help you out as well.
Yeah, there's one called PlantSnap that takes pictures of stuff. I think iNaturalist has some ability. So we're actually getting to the point where we can use machine learning to take pictures, submit them to a database, and then they can actually let you know what it is, which is pretty neat as well. So, yep, great question. And I use, actually, I have a little pocket guide on my phone that I'm going to look up right now. I think it's called, this is a great little resource that has a lot of native and invasive species. Wisconsin wildflower flowers is what it's called. So that's a cool little application that allows you to, it's got a guide to it. And I believe I'm actually in my GLEDN app right now. Yeah, so I think there's some cool online stuff, and the GLEDN app itself has pictures of in fact, if you so that app version of it, all the invasive species that are in there also have a variety of photos. They have information which includes a written description of appearance, flower types, how it fruits, why it's a threat, high quality images of distinguishing characteristics, and then also a map of where it's been located. And you can bet that the closer you are to those locations, the more likely it is that there's actually been another sighting of it that you might be accurate to. So yeah, I think that there's some great online resources that we can use to help get ourselves up on that. So check out that GLEDN app and see what you can find.
All right. It doesn't look like we have any further questions right now. Looks like, well, Robert has a comment in here. He's not advocating for this, but he's intrigued by the natural decline of some species, such as Eurasian water milfoil, across the United States and after several decades. And I think that's a trend we're seeing with a lot of invasive species on a whole. In fact, I think we've seen that a little bit with garlic mustard as well, where invasives over a long periods of time will actually start to even out or even decline in some cases. So
yeah, that's an interesting point, Robert. And I mean, nature does find a way, right? Things rise and fall, and that's again maybe another interesting reason that the citizen science is so pertinent, is that we have a narrative of what is bad out there and how these things happen, but the reality is that we need to do adaptive management and continue to connect the long-term trends of these things. We can't just rest on our laurels and think, oh yeah, well, garlic mustard's out there. We kind of like to see where it's spreading and how it's spreading, and if it's disappeared from a site, that's also really useful. There is a way with these things that you can, and there's also a tools and trainings over here. If you look at my screen, there's a tools and trainings. There's other resources there for getting deeper into the app. That was just a kind of a quick overview. There's even ways to report that you found no invasive species, so that's also valuable sometimes to know, because that means you're out there, you looked. Is it conclusive that there's none? No, but it helps to get that data sometimes as well.
All right. Well, without any further questions that I'm seeing, I think we're going to wrap it up. But I have a few quick announcements to make as well. I'll share my screen.
I'll drop this. There you
go. Hopefully you're able to see the screen here.
Looks good.
Okay, so Matt's going to be giving another presentation this Friday, actually, with a partner on this very topic. He's going to be talking about a little bit more about this app. He mentioned the top 10 list of invasives. You can catch that on Friday, 1:30 to 3 o'clock. Be sure to sign up for it first. So go to uppersugar.org/events or go to our Facebook page, and you should be able to have a sign up there and get involved. It should be a really great partnership presentation that we have going on Friday afternoon. So please sign up for that. One other thing I wanted to mention too, we have our, despite the Rob's ramble being a little bit interrupted, I guess we'll say, this year, our raffle ticket sales are still going on. This year we have a really awesome grand prize. It's this 10.5-foot kayak. Retail value of the kayak is over $800, and the prize package will include 2 entries to the Rob's Ramble in 2021. So it's a really attractive prize package, along with a bunch of other prizes that will come, some smaller prizes that will come in case you didn't win the grand prize. So we're selling raffle tickets online. All you have to do is go to uppersugar.org/ramble, and our webpage should be up there. I'll kind of walk you through it. Here's the Ramble webpage here. All you have to do is click on Ramble Raffle Tickets, and it should take you to the site to purchase your tickets here. So it's really easy to do online. You can pick one ticket for $5 or 5 for $20, and then you just hit checkout, and it takes you to the payment screen. So this is a really easy way to support us and potentially win a really cool kayak and a couple passes to the Ramble next year. So hope you folks will take advantage of that. Without any further questions or any other comments from the group, I really want to thank you guys for participating and making the best of this series. This is the last conversation about conservation for the year, or for the season. We'll pick this back up in November, but between now and November, we're going to have plenty of other really cool events that we're hoping to transition into a virtual format until we can finally meet in person and see all of your smiling faces in real life. So I think on behalf of Matt and Robert, our board president, who joined us today as well, I want to thank all of y'all for being part of this, and I hope you guys all stay safe. Thanks again for coming.
Yeah, great questions, everyone. I really appreciate the engagement, and please don't be shy. Matt at uppersugar.org. Any more questions, feel free to reach out. And we're always looking for volunteers. So if you poke me and want some training, get on our list, and we're going to be doing these live when we can. So let's get out in the field together and enjoy the outdoors and make a difference with citizen science.
All right, folks. Thanks again for coming.
Have a great night,
Talk to you
everybody.
later.